friends, and thank you for joining us on Charting the Way Forward, where we deliver research-informed strategy and intelligence from across the Democratic coalition. This podcast is produced by Way to Win. I'm your host, Kerry Eleveld, and today I have a special guest. We were going to actually record with one of our own and this special guest, but it's just the special guest and me. And without further ado, it is Kristian Ramos. Kristian, do you want to say your name correctly?
Kristian Anselmo David Ramos de la Vega, Esquire III.
Wow, that was way more than I could have planned on. Impressive. Okay, so Kristian is a friend of the pod. We have not had him on in a bit, but I was excited to see if we could get him back. And we are going to be riding just the two of us today. And welcome back. How you been, Kristian?
I'm good. I'm on the island of Vieques off the coast of Puerto Rico. So very good. Relaxed, actually. So
relaxed. All right.
Yes.
What's the scenery around where you are? What's relaxing?
Tropical. Very tropical. A lot of humidity, a lot of ocean, a lot of beach.
All right. I'd like to hear it. I'm just envisioning it as you talk about it. Okay. Last week, I cited a quote from a GOP operative bemoaning Trump's war and tariffs and telling Politico of the midterms, we're waiting for the bottom to fall out. And I thought, you know who we should have on to give us a report from the Hill? Kristian. So let's start there. The generic ballot is at roughly D+8, D+9, depending on who, which poll, but that's roughly the average of legitimate polls. And, despite some infighting among the Democrats, Trump is historically unpopular for a president at this point in their term. House Republicans just headed home for the August recess, which is actually 5 weeks because they need more time to relax from all the legislating they've been doing, Kristian. And why don't you give us a sense of the mood on the Hill? Will Republicans be holding a bunch of town halls? How do you think Republicans are feeling at this point in the midterm trajectory?
So I'm glad you brought up Congress because let's just set the stage here. They've already set one record with the 43-day government shutdown. But congressional data also shows in the first year of the 119th Congress, they have the second fewest number of bills becoming law since at least the 70s. And the bills that they have passed have made healthcare more expensive and taken away food assistance. They also have the record of working the least amount of any Congress in history. And so as somebody who's worked on the Hill before, I can tell you it is highly unusual to work so little. And I think the reason that they are working so little is because it is incredibly dysfunctional between the Senate and the House and Donald Trump. And Trump, I think, honestly, does not care if they keep the House or the Senate. I think he, at this point, is literally just in it for the grift and is just doing whatever he can to make as much money as he possibly can. They just actually canceled a bunch of government funds that were keeping keeping prescription drug prices lower. For what reason, I could not tell you. This is a very popular thing that was done under a previous administration, the Biden administration, and they just got rid of it.
Wow.
And prescription drug prices are going to rise. Medicaid prices are going to rise. All of these things are going to rise. And I think a lot of frontline Republican members know that they are in a lot of trouble, right? You also have to keep in mind the tariffs. Trump is actually hurting farmers all over the country, right? That's something else that they are trying to do, is get money to farmers because they've all gone bankrupt because of the tariffs. People don't realize that they work both ways, right? Our tariffs, people sell stuff to other countries. And when they levy the tariffs and then there's retaliatory tariffs, farmers lose a lot of money. And Congress has done exactly nothing to help these farmers, has done nothing to rein in Trump's worst impulses. And a lot of the frontline members are not in good shape right now.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. The tariffs, of course, aren't doing anything to to push downward on prices either. I mean, it's just raising prices. And the ongoing situation in Iran is just spiking gas everywhere. I can't imagine if I were a Republican, sort of a worse set of situations. What this operative was basically saying is, you're putting, especially people who are in frontline districts, sort of between a rock and a hard place, because the party has decided that as unpopular as Trump is, they're still going to hug him. They're still going to do, most of everything he says. They're going to do his bidding. They aren't reining him in on the war. They aren't actively fighting his agenda. And so the people on the front lines, on the one hand, they're forced to hug him in hopes that maybe, which I will say has not turned out to be true in the past, but maybe his people will turn out for them. And at the same time, they are just absolutely alienating everybody else who might be a potential swing voter. Yeah.
This is an important point you're making, and I want to be crystal clear about this. There's two levels to this. One, what has really hurt the Republican Party under this administration is where they have prioritized who they are helping. And what I mean by that is when Democrats controlled Congress and the White House, say what you will about what we accomplished, they did prioritize helping working Americans. The money went to people. This big ugly bill that they passed, it is cutting services for the American people and giving money directly to mega corporations, the mega rich. When we talk about an administration that is bought, owned, and sold to corporations and the mega rich, there has never been anything like this in the history of the country when it comes to what has happened with the Republican Party. That's one. Two, the Republicans on the Hill have done nothing, literally nothing, to rein in this president's worst impulses, whether it's the tariffs, whether it's Iran, whether it's you name it, they've done nothing. And so I do think I have no sympathy for them because they have literally sat on their hands. Congress is supposed to be a co-equal branch of the government, and they have oversight and they have the power of the purse. They have done nothing but give Donald Trump the money, the means to carry out an agenda that has been toxic for the American worker and for the American people.
I was thinking while you were talking, MAGA corruption. So I don't know if that's something that someone else has said, and I'm like coming up with that phrase on the fly. I don't care. I kind of like it.
It could be a podcast title. The name of the podcast, MAGA corruption. There you go.
I like it. So, and Dems this week, Hakeem Jeffries, the minority leader, was in Pennsylvania launching 100 days of action. And there was the huge the tagline for the campaign is fighting for an affordable America. We've got both fighting, which is something that we started, fighting, not folding. We started pressing last year. And now it's like from Hakeem Jeffries, all the way to, Abdul al-Said or whatever, in Michigan running for Congress. I'm just saying, from, the congressional leadership to DSA candidates, affordability and fighting are things that everybody is on message about. So that's sort of that's a unifying message across the board for Democratic candidates, even as, there's a lot of talk about the infighting and whatever. Everybody's on that message. And Republicans are stuck with Trump. Let's see. Oh, yes. I saw this report that Republicans are also holding a first of its kind midterm national convention in September with Trump front and center. I was like, yikes. We're kicking off, 100 days of fighting for affordability for working families, and they are going to hold a national convention with Trump right at it as the as the keynote, apparently. So that sounds fraught. I don't know if you want to comment on that, or
I think there's a couple things. One, I want to say Leader Jeffries has done a commendable job of holding his caucus together and keeping focus on winning. Two, Republicans have no midterm message. They cannot run on affordability. They cannot run on reining in foreign influence. They can't run on no forever wars. I think literally every campaign promise that Trump made, he has flipped on. So Republicans are in a double bind here, right? I do think, again, Leader Jeffries is right. It's affordability, fighting for affordability and making sure that the American people understand what has happened and what Democrats are going to do if they come back into office to help them. But again, Republicans, they're not running. They can't run on affordability. They can't run on ending forever wars. They can't run on. They can't even run on releasing the Epstein files.
Yeah.
This thing that was like core to the MAGA movement is really bad for them right now. So they have no midterm message.
It's splitting the movement is what it's doing. I mean, that the Epstein file thing, there's a bunch of people who are who've taken on Trump over this. And then there's people who are trying to explain it away. That's not a good situation for them. But, your point is a perfect segue into what I wanted to get into in the second part of this episode, which is immigration. They can't, Republicans can't run on anything really. And so they are trying to get back to a familiar playbook. And, I saw this. It's interesting. Okay, so there's a few things that I was putting together. First of all, there was that brutal Fox News poll from last week that was terrible for Trump on many levels. But one thing I noticed, so I was looking at, the issues in which Dems lead on most of them, and it had income inequality, Dem plus 22, healthcare, Dem plus 21, inflation and prices, Dem plus 10. That's a new high in that poll. Economy, Dems plus 9. That's a new high in that poll. Foreign policy, Dems plus 7. So there were two things on which Republicans were winning. National security, which was R plus 2. And that's like, it's kind of a wash because it's within the polls, margin of error. But then there was let's see. They are winning on crime. That's and exciting news. We have some fresh stuff, and we have some good potential messaging on crime that we're going to be coming out with later. So I'm just teasing that. But anyway. But there on immigration, even immigration, which has so, regularly been in the Republican wheelhouse, so much so that Democrats at the beginning of the year and last year during the or in 2024, last year, man, the cycles just run together. But in 2024, Dems were kind of just folding on immigration and almost adopting some Dems in tough places were almost adopting a Republican posture on immigration in some ways. But on immigration, Dems were also +1, which was in April, Republicans were +8 on immigration. So they're trying to claw back an advantage on one thing that they think they can run on because they've been shut out of basically everything else. And NPR reported that from January through June, Republicans had plowed a total of about $53 million on immigration ads into 88 races across 27 states, something like roughly 300 immigration ads total. Republicans also outspent Democrats on immigration-related advertising by about $36 million. So Republicans put out about 300 immigration ads. Democrats had put out roughly 62, mostly in places where We've seen, increased enforcement, presence of ICE, terrible, sort of horrific immigration actions like California, New York, Illinois. So, they are trying to get back into the business of immigration. I think my guess is, and I'd like to hear what you think, but my guess is it feels like the only place where they might be able to find a respite if they can claw back an advantage on this. And the question to me is, can they? But we'll get into that in a second. But I'm interested in your thoughts.
So I'm going to take a circuitous route to answering your question, but I think it's important for context. I think I started working on immigration 2009, 2010. Mm-hmm. And back in that time, there were your Mark Krikorians, your CIS, these really virulent anti-immigrant groups that were too far to the right for even most mainstream Republicans. They mostly were working with Jeff Sessions. I don't know if folks remember that guy, but Jeff Sessions, his main architect of all of his crazy anti-immigration stuff was Stephen Miller. And Stephen Miller was friends with all of those folks. And for years they said, if we use mass deportation, we will be able to get rid of immigrants that are here illegally, and we will also unlock the power of the economy because the American worker will not be competing with immigrants. Mm-hmm. And that became sort of the core of the message, of their core of their ideological view on this issue. Smash cut to 2025, 2026. They are doing mass deportation. They are shooting Americans in the face. They are detaining Americans. They are executing on this thing that they've talked about for a very long time. And it's been a disaster for them. It's been a disaster for them in the polling. It's been a disaster for them in practice. It is entering into some of the darkest moments in American history, right?
That's right. 100%.
And so it's not a thing that they, in the long term, can turn into a winning issue because the policy is garbage. The policy is detrimental, both from a human rights standpoint, but also from a pure economic standpoint. And I do think, again, not to be pedantic here, their view of the world, of the United States and the country is small. They want to close our country off to the rest of the world. What makes our country unique in all the world is the ability to come from anywhere, to start over, to contribute. It is why people loved, I don't know, this country to begin with. And so I don't think it will ever be popular in the mainstream if they continue to act in this way. Because I do think people love their, not to be reduce this to something silly as food, but like people love Italian food, people love Mexican food, people love all sorts of things. They like to experience different cultures. And in the United States and America, our culture is elastic in a way that other countries are not. And, turning us into a closed off state, I just don't think it's not a winner politically for them in the long term.
Do you remember like several months ago? I can't remember. I think it was towards the beginning of the year. All of a sudden there were reports that the White House was starting and Republicans on the Hill, leadership maybe, was starting to try to tamp down talk of mass deportations. They were like, mass deportations is actually not helping us, so stop talking about it, which was interesting. It was like an absolute recognition, surrender that was not. I don't hear much about mass deportations anymore. Do you hear much about mass deportations, or have they successfully sort of?
The Mark Wayne Mullen era at DHS has been interesting to me because if you're paying attention, they're still doing horrible things. I think the lesson they learned is they're no longer picking these big public fights about all the horrible things they're doing on immigration, because I think there is an acknowledgement, at least in some quarters of the White House, that it's a loser to detain American citizens without due process. It's a loser to harass and detain people of color to the scale with which they were. And I, again, just taking the long view here, historically speaking, people are going to look back on this period of our country's history and say that it's among the darkest, ever, because of that, because of the fact that we're doing these horrible things that we have always accused other countries of doing. Yeah. We always accuse these fascist military states abroad of doing this type of stuff to their disappearing citizens. Well, we're doing a very similar thing here, and I think it's very scary to a lot of people, and a political loser.
What's interesting? So that NPR piece was talking about what they had done in what they had spent in January through June, but of course it's unclear as of July. But we already had two high-profile shootings in early July in both Texas and Maine, right? And now you've got this increased presence of ICE in airports. I was just seeing this report over the last 24 hours from the New York Times. And ICE was originally deployed to airports when there were a bunch of lines. There was, a whole lot of snafus, and there was some personnel shortages. And the original idea was, they can help, keep things orderly and give a little assistance to TSA agents. This was back in I want to say February, March of this year. And now they're actually actively stepping up the presence and going after more than just people who have deportation orders, but they're arresting people who have expired visas, and they're getting aggressive in airports. And I just can't imagine, supposedly Mark Wayne Mullen has sort of tamped things down a little bit. I think that was true for a couple months. Things were a little bit lower profile, but we're back to shooting people. And now we're going to go into, we're going into airports, and we're arresting, au pairs who have overstayed their visas and things like that. I mean, this is crazy talk. And I just can't imagine that this is. Here, let me give you some polling. Back in March, when we were talking about the ICE presence, mainly as helping TSA, people didn't like it even then. G. Elliott Morris at Strength in Numbers did a flash poll on this in March, and 53% of people disapproved of deploying ICE agents to airports. That was before they were arresting au pairs. I mean, airport chaos. 77% say the conditions at the airports were worse than usual, and 52% were blaming the Trump administration. This is when there were just long lines, right? People were waiting for hours to board, get through the security checkpoint and things like that. Trust of ICE at the time was only at 37% trust in ICE. So they're taking those numbers, which were already pretty bad, and now they're going to be literally harassing people at the airports. I am gobsmacked that this is the idea that they would be pushing heading into the midterms.
I think the hardest part about all of this is, politically, as a political analyst, as somebody who watches, I know this stuff is toxic. I know the more that people interact with this, it is a political loser for this administration and congressional Republicans. The hardest part is we still have to live through it. Yes. We still have to experience it and go through it. And I think that, to me, is scary, is hard, because just the shootings themselves, those are fathers, those are family men, those are people who really are human beings and have lives, and they should still be here. And I think it's very, very, very scary right now, in that sense, because, you know, we're talking about this in terms of numbers and everything else. And I think, yes, you're correct. This is not popular. People do not want ICE at the airports. But it's also people's lived experiences. It's also people's lives that we're talking about here, in terms of those that are getting, you know, harassed and everything else is, you know, it's very heavy. It's a very heavy moment in our country's history.
It is. And, you know, there's probably going to be more videos coming out of ICE agents arresting people at airports. And, you know, we have to see it. People have to know what's going on. You know, they're not smart enough to keep this under wraps. So it's coming out, whether they're, you know, actually managing to kill people or whether they're doing this in very public spaces. You know, like at least we are seeing it. We know it's going on. That you have to be like literally like living under a rock to not know what's going on, or you have to be, you know, part of the MAGA cult that is like, this is, you know, great. This is what I've always wanted.
Yeah, I mean, I think yes. I think the flip side here, again, not to be a Robert Downer Jr. here,
no,
but there's probably a lot of stuff that people don't see, that people don't understand, and I think, you know, again, this is why no one's ever done this stuff before. You know, my grandmother doesn't speak English very well. You know, let's say she takes the bus somewhere or something, and I know she doesn't carry around her passport or anything else. You know, somebody can stop her and harass her, and then, you know, what happens? And I think that's the thing where before it was just like, well, you know, if you just follow the rules and you don't do anything bad, then you don't have to worry about. But no, I mean, this is, again, harassment of people based upon their looks, and that politically very unpopular, but also very scary, and stuff that they used to do in East Berlin, right? I mean, this is stuff that you know, in these sort of fascist countries, was quite commonplace and was incredibly problematic, and nobody, I think, in a million years thought could happen in the United States if not for.
Right. I just want to, before we start to wrap a little bit here, I wanted to remind people of, you know, some of the polling that we did on winning messages earlier this year in the first part of our Sunbelt Battleground poll. And this was specifically messaging around ICE. And we tested a populist message against a more like a more centrist message. And the better, you know, the best performing message with low motivation voters and double haters was pretty in your face. It was populist. It was, we need to protect people, keep families together, and keep communities safe instead of allowing ICE to shoot innocent citizens, surround our schools, take kids from their parents, and tear gas families. The more centrist message was, we need to put sensible safeguards around ICE and increase training to make sure they do their jobs right and secure the border and stop illegal immigration. So I'm just letting people know that, you know, from a standpoint of low motivation voters, progressive voters definitely liked the populist message more. But the low motivation voters and the voters who are not particularly happy with either party right now, the more, you know, explicit messaging actually worked better on this. Do you have any reflections on that?
I think it's been consistent. Yeah. I feel like it's consistently that way. And I feel like, you know, I do think immigration is a winning message for Democrats. And I think immigration is a winning message for Democrats because Republicans have gone so far over their skis and are doing things that are never in a million years going to be popular with a broad electorate. You know, I can't speak for MAGA, like the hardcore MAGA people. I think this is probably popular for them. But for the broader electorate, you know, shredding people's constitutional rights, harassing people, getting rid of folks that are here contributing and are a part of our society in a very real way is never going to be popular in this moment. And I think Democrats have to come out here and say, look, we are for people coming to this country who want to contribute, who want to provide, who want to help make our country better. That is a winner. That's a winner. And I think we have to scream that from the rooftop, and we have to find solutions to help create a stronger country and a better country. And that comes from being a part of the world. That comes from being, a part of the world and having people be able to enter and leave the country legally, right? And we should know who comes into this country, and we should know who leaves this country. I mean, that, yes, of course.
Right.
That is different than what the Republicans are proposing, which is they literally want to close all the doors to enter this country. And that is not popular. Nobody thinks, a very small segment of the populace thinks that's a good idea.
Yeah. Nor is it good for the economy, frankly. But there's a lot of things. There's a lot of levels on which it's not great. Before we get out of here, you're an expert on Latinos, the Latino vote. And while I know that, immigration in many cases for Latinos is not their top issue, it's oftentimes affordability or something like that. But there are these, I would have asked Joe about this, to be honest. So I'm putting you on the spot, but there are these like districts in Texas specifically where, Republicans redrew the districts thinking that they might hold on to Latinos, that Trump, sort of Trump's gains with Latinos in 2024. And now these districts are drawn on that assumption. But I'm just wondering from you, on a basis, just of looking at the Latino vote and sifting through the numbers, is that a place where on the margins, this really aggressive posture is going to push away some of those voters?
So I think it's a combination of things. And I'm glad you're asking this, because what's really interesting about what's happening in a place like the RGV is you're getting these candidates who look like the RGV. And I'm talking about your Johnny Garcias, your Bobby Politos. Go ahead.
Will you RGV? Sorry, the
RGV, Rio Grande Valley.
Oh yeah, thanks. Okay, so we're talking specific to testings. Okay, good.
Yeah. So yeah, and I'm talking about like these candidates like Johnny Garcia, who was a former sheriff, deputy sheriff, Bobby Polito, the singer.
These are Democrats.
These are Democrats running down there who are very, very, they look and feel like the district. And I think they're the next generation. And I think they are going to be able to take advantage of your folks who are really upset about what happened. And I think what you're going to see in Texas, best case scenario, I think you're going to see a lot of these Latinos who switched from Democrats to Republicans, either switching back, or you're going to see them stay home. And I think them staying home is a net positive, right? Because they're not going to vote for the Republican, for the Democrats. And if we can turn out our base voters, right, these folks who are furious about what's happening around the economy, I think mostly. I think some people are probably also upset about immigration. Although the RGV is very unique in its views on this stuff. But I think that there is an opportunity to capitalize on this stuff right now in a way that was not that long ago. But I do think it is going to be these candidates, your Johnny Garcias, your Bobby Politos, your Vicente Gonzalez's, who are going to be able to capitalize in a way that we haven't in the past.
All right. That's what we like to hear. Okay, so thank you to Kristian Ramos who has a very long name. I didn't realize it was so long.
That's actually not my name. Not my name. I have no middle names. I just do that when people can't say my name. So
I love it. I know I can't say your name very well, which is why when we used to have you on, I would say, and featuring, and you would say, go ahead, say
Kristian Ramos. There you
yes.
go. There it is.
I have trouble with the rolled R's.
The R's.
Yes, being the gringa I am. All right, great. Well, thank you for coming on. We've had the sort of the wisp of the island in the background every once in a while. I feel like we caught just a little bit of wind, a little bit of, you could hear the sway of the ocean. It was kind of nice. But anyway, we really appreciate you joining us from Puerto Rico, coming straight from Puerto Rico. And I want to say thank you to our listeners for, continuing to be with us on this journey of building a better American future. Please go ahead, subscribe, review. Don't miss any episodes. Tell a friend, recruit a friend so that you can talk about the episodes. We do a little bit less sort of reactionary commentary, right? It's a little bit more informed, data informed, research informed. We talk about the issues of the day, but sometimes we have a 30,000-foot view. But we're not quite like Pod Save America or, I don't know, Hacks on Tap or whatever you might listen to. We're not quite just like, okay, this thing happened. How did it play? We are trying to give you just a little bit deeper analysis, and we want people to be informed and not just be sort of like beholden to conventional wisdom in Washington, D.C. So that's why we have people like Kristian on. That's why we feature a lot of research. And, you could invite a friend to listen, and then you guys can be more informed, debate the issues, all that stuff. We'd love to have you. And with that, until next week, when we will have Ben Wickler, who's been making the rounds, but we hope to, give a little bit more of a progressive Democratic spin on the interviews. Hopefully, I will find some questions to ask him that he hasn't been asked, or I can delve a little deeper into some questions that he's answered, but we want to hear more. Until then, do good. Be well, hug your loved ones, and please tell your dog I say hi.